Hello viewers. The teaching methods of Dr. Uthra D. Well, firstly, I'd like to establish that her classes were lots of fun. I would look forward to her classes all the time. We'd learn a lot of science, and we'd learn a little bit of Sherlock Holmes work on the side as well. A small example would be, let's say that she's teaching us Ohm's law, and she'd tell us interesting things that happened in the life of George Simon Ohm. And she'd take those events, she'd link them to how he got inspired to come up with the law, to do experiments, to investigate the law. This is just an example. The same could be said of someone like Laplace. So she interesting little anecdotes that would add to the trivia factor. That would appeal to the odd person who'd like a little bit of finesse with his science, so to speak. Next, she one thing I noted is that she helps you remember the little things. Like, for example, again with Ohm's law, what do you put on the x-axis and what do you put on the y-axis? She taught us a very simple trick, almost to the point of if I mention it, then people might ask me, are you saying you needed a trick to remember this? So something like that. So she'd say, put the variable you can control on the x-axis and put the variable you're studying on the y-axis. And that sort of carried over to everything else that I studied as well, at least personally for me. Then next was her two-pronged approach to class. Two-pronged in that she taught us to appreciate the finer things in science, doing it the fun way, and how to ace the question in the exam. I still remember how she taught us Torricelli's theorem. She taught us how to use fancy words in definitions without without pulling our hairs out. So speaking of words, she'd do this little exercise with us. She'd give us a bunch of words. Like, again, let's consider Torricelli's theorem as an example. She'd say height, fluid, orifice, velocity, pressure. She'd give us these words and she'd tell us to make sentences with them. That spoke to me personally because it sort of made my life easier, I suppose. It helped us come up with definitions easily, and you write a definition correctly and everything else sort of follows from that. She emphasized on us writing point by point. So if you have 10 sentences, don't cram them together into a single large paragraph. Break them up into points so the examiner doesn't have to go through that huge bulk of text. That was another thing that I remember strongly. On the concept of exam orientedness, I suppose, when we were doing derivations, she'd repeatedly say in class, go from known to unknown. I sort of faced this situation in an entrance exam. Suddenly I couldn't remember the units for the universal gravitational constant. So she told me, okay, do you know any instance where the gravitational constant is present? So you write down that equation, transport everything except g to the other side, write down the units of everything on the other side, and there you go. That's the universal gravitational constant. Silly, maybe, to some people, but definitely useful. She would emphasize going from known to unknown. She'd say that at least once every lecture, whenever we're doing derivations. On the subject of the universal gravitational law, she would tell us to use our hands a lot. For example, let's say that she's teaching us inverse square laws. The fundamental thing is, as distance increases, the force due to an inverse square law decreases as the inverse square, hence the name obviously. So she wouldn't be content with us just telling her that. She would repeatedly ask us to say, as distance decreases, force increases as its square. So she made us use our hands a lot. That was an interesting thing that I remember till this day. Another thing that comes to mind is, let's say when we finish a derivation or when we arrive at the final equation of some law, let's say Einstein's mass energy equivalence. Once we're done with it, once we write that E equals mc squared and draw a box around it, she'd ask us, you have just derived Einstein's mass energy equivalence. Are you not all Einsteins? So it spoke to me a little bit because I found it interesting that she would, draw parallels with the people that came up with it in the first place. It's certainly an interesting thing to think about, to say the least. I guess in conclusion, suffice it to say that her method of teaching is definitely different, to say the least, compared to the, what is considered usual, what is considered traditional in any sense of the word. But again, like I said at the beginning, it was fun. I definitely enjoyed going to every single class of hers. Given the opportunity, I'd do it again any day of the week.